Hello and welcome to the Health Evolution Collective. Today I am here with the lovely Natalie West, who we've been wanting to record this chat for a little while together, and we're finally sitting down to do it and to share the amazing stuff that you do. So welcome, Natalie. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Trace. I know it's we got here.
We did. So I would love you to explain one of the questions. The way I ask this normally with my guests is, if we met at a party, how would you tell me about you? Because I think that people love just to hear you and what you do, what you're about, and why we're here today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a question I get all the time. So if someone says, what is it that you do, Natalie? I literally just respond with, I'm a self-image specialist, and my background for the last 20 years has been in clinical psychotherapy and really teaching people how their minds work.
I love it.
That's
I love
me.
it. So what does excuse my ignorance, explain the DCHT-IICT. What does that mean?
So the DCHT is my qualification, and
Yep.
the IICT is basically our required membership as a clinical therapist globally, to be a part of the membership. Yeah, so that's what those two things are. Yeah.
Okay. So a clinical psychotherapist, is that, I'd love you to explain, what that is about, and does every clinical psychotherapist do what you do, or is it you've made this your own?
So if I take you back probably past 20 years ago, for me being in this industry, I was in the corporate world for a very, very long time, and a lot of sales management, operational management. So I've always been very, very inclined about how our minds work, and especially being in a sales background, what made someone say yes and what made someone say no. And I've always been quite fascinated with that. And then also having a background with, family, with self-image and anxiety and depression issues, it was always something that I think it was just, and your purpose kind of finds you, but you don't really know that it finds you until later. So I first started my journey 20 years ago out of corporate land, really wanting to delve into going, I don't want to work for anybody anymore. That was my core of what I wanted to do. And after having children, that was really prevalent to me. So I've got a 14-year-old now and a 10-year-old, but they were the kind of prefaces for me to start my journey. And I just went to a few seminars and presenters that I really just valued in Melbourne, and one of them was a psychotherapist, and he just blew my mind, just literally about the power of understanding your unconsciousness, your programming, your precognitive commitment between the ages 0 to 7. And I just sat there like a little kid with big eyes going, oh, this is it. This is it. And even my whole body, I remember even just remembering it now, it just takes me back to that space of excitement. But to be a psychotherapist, you also had to prior learning. You couldn't just go into psychotherapy without having another pre-qualification. So I had a big chat with him, and he just said, you know what, you're actually going to have to do hypnotherapy, clinical hypnosis before as a foundation to start into learning any type of other psychotherapy work. So I was just like, okay, great, just tell me what to do. So I started with clinical hypnosis just to see if I liked it. I fell in love with it. It was just like, this is it. And then I just went, okay, then I'm going to become a clinical hypnotherapist. So I did that. That took me 2 years and, clinical practice. And then inside of that learning, you also become a clinical counselor as well. But for me, I really, really needed more of that psychotherapy, modality. And, Carl Jung, I don't know if anybody of your listeners may know Carl Jung, but there's a lot of his work in what I do. So psychotherapy is a modality that you learn on top of, some psychologists do psychotherapy. It just really depends on what you want to do with your clients and your customers. But for me, self-image was the big thing that I saw that just kept popping up in everyone, and that's where our self-image is developed between the ages 0 to 7. So for me, also working in that psych space, like I would always ask people the first 2 questions when I met them was, has anyone ever showed you how your mind works? And do you know what your self-image is? And do you know how it pushes your behavior and your values for the rest of your life? Most of the time the answer is no.
No, because we don't get taught that. Who teaches that? No one, apart from you and a few others.
We don't. And, you know, it's so crucial, and just, you know, being in this space for so long, and I just love helping people actually see the light inside themselves and to be able to wake up and turn that light back on. It's always been there. But unfortunately, what happens is, you know, going back between that 0 to 7 and that pre-cognitive commitment, if you think about your head as a little kid, like it's just a video camera, and your eyes are the lens to the world. And from a conscious space, you hear, you see, you feel, but we don't have that analytical and cognitive part of our brain and our mind to go, I don't want that. That doesn't serve me very well. You don't know that at 5. You know, anyone in authority to you, which is what I call our guardians, which is, you know, mum, dad, our environment, and our state, which is also outside of the home. So we learn our values, our belief structures about who we are from our guardians, which are our parents. And even if you don't grow up with your parents, you know, that's your caregivers. So we're, you know, little sponges, and your unconscious mind just lays down program after program after program for potential use in the future, whether or not it might serve you or not. And sadly, I'd probably say 90% of humans are developed and programmed with a very, very poor and conflicted self-image.
So that's fascinating, because, I mean, you know, I think we connected because I talk and I've seen a lot of that, but I've come to it for a very different perspective, and I don't have the psychotherapy, but, you know, learning what I've learned in terms from the 3 principles, it's so similar in terms of understanding how we work. But what I'd love to really explore with you is you talk about that 0 to 7 as being when we lay the groundwork for a lot of our self-beliefs and values and all of that. So how does that look then to someone who is in their 40s and, you know, probably wants to see something new around that? Is it possible to change those? That's what I guess I'm asking.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And, you know, I've worked with many, many people that have been in therapy, all types of therapy for many, many years. And, you know, I always say twofold, unless you actually understand how your mind works, talking about things really isn't going to get you too far. And the other question that I always ask people, which is actually quite interesting coming from a psychotherapy background, is, yeah, 1, do you know how your mind works? But 2, also tell me what you eat, which we'll come back to that later, because that's really, really crucial. And I get a lot of weird looks, blank looks, like, why are you asking me that? But in relation to our self-image, so what normally happens, Trace, like if I said to you right now, you know, when you think about the word relationship, what's the first thing that comes up in your mind? Where do you go when you think about that?
Do you want me to answer?
Yeah, I do, because most people will probably be hearing me going, oh gosh, where is my mind going? So even with the word relationship, where does your mind go normally? First thing?
Jim, my husband.
External. Correct. And you know what? It's external. So the minute our mind hears the word, and this is the one thing that's really, well, 2 things actually, it's really crucial on top of what I'm saying. Your mind works on what it hears externally and internally, and the pictures that you create. So that's thought, feeling, reaction. So between 0 to 7, what we are taught in relation to relationships, we are taught externally. We are learning to validate ourselves externally. So when have you ever heard, you know, respect your elders, and, you know, don't do that because someone might not like you, or they might not love you if you do that. So for me, being a self-image specialist, you know, when I talk about the word relationship and relationship behaviors, I'm not talking about the ones where your mind goes. I'm talking about you. So the most important relationship is you, but we don't learn that. We don't learn how to respect ourselves. We don't learn how to validate ourselves, and we don't learn how to love ourselves, because, again, love is an external validation. So our self-images are developed based on everything external.
Wow. So, so are you saying then that what we need to do is stop looking outside but start looking within? And can we do that at any stage of our life?
Well, the thing is, I always say to people, your external world is the mirror image of what's going on inside you. So, for example, a lot of people that I work with in relation to relationships or food programming, diet programming, all of that cultural stuff that we learn, it's the common thing that I hear is, I know this is not good for me, and I know I keep attracting the same type of people, but I can't help it. Why do the same people show up, or why do I end up, feeling so depleted within myself when I'm draining myself externally for someone else's validation or someone's, worthiness of me? So we also don't learn as children how to value ourselves, what our own values are and our beliefs about ourselves. So most of our human beliefs, until you kind of work with someone like myself, like all your belief structure and your values have been given to you, and your unconscious mind doesn't know any different. It doesn't think. So your conscious mind is about 10% of what you do every day. Your unconscious mind is 90%. So you're mostly in autopilot every single day of your life until you wake up and go, hold on, why am I 1 minute feeling like I'm really, really good and I can do something and I feel really, really confident, but then the other side of me feels like, no, don't do that. And you feel like there's two of you sometimes inside your head, but you're in between positive self-image and negative self-image. And generally and sadly, humans are always generally programmed from a very negative point instead of being a positive point. And again, our minds operate on familiarity because that's safe. So if you think about, back, that millions of years ago when we're in tribes, we still have that innate part of us as a human where when we stay in a tribe, we're safe, we're comfortable, we fit in, right? So the minute that your mind goes, hold on, whoa, I'm stepping out into uncomfortability here, like this is dangerous, this might be bad for you. So what it does, it pulls you back instantly. That's its job. Its job's to protect you, whether or not it is or not, because your unconscious mind doesn't think, it just reacts.
It just reacts, yeah. So how do we start to see beyond that? Because, I completely, this makes so much sense to me. I completely see this. And, this whole tribal, makeup of our brain. And the reality is it just doesn't help us in the society that we live in now. So it's almost like we have to see beyond the way it works to move forward and to change. So how do we do that then?
So really it's, I think over the years, like we're always been taught that our mind, so when I say brain and mind, very two different things. So mind, I've always been taught that it's so difficult and it's so hard to understand. It actually isn't. It literally will do what it thinks you want it to do. So if you're so familiar in that negative thought of like, I can't, it won't, your mind just is like, okay, well, this is really familiar to me. But the other thing that we actually also get lost in is from our chin down, we also have a lot of energy that goes along in our body. So, we actually have to line apart from our consciousness, unconscious, but we also have to get in line with our body. We can't just talk to this bit. We've also got to connect with the feeling. So when I say to people, give me an idea, or, if you have anxiety, tell me how you do anxiety. So people will feel it immediately in their body. They normally don't feel it in their head. So if you are just talking to someone about their anxiety, but you're not getting to the core of the root of where it is in their body, that's where wounds are, that's where trauma is. It's held in your body as well, not just in your mind and the pictures that your mind creates.
Fascinating stuff. So I guess there's a lot of hope, right? Because I have a lot of women that sit in front of me as well with years and years of habitual dieting, and a lack of what you would say, what was said in the beginning, that was it relationships, you know, with themselves, you know, a
Yes.
real fundamental lack of that. And, you know, I believe exactly like you said, you know, that the light is in all of us. You know, I don't think anyone is born without everything they need to thrive,
Yes.
right? So it's about exactly what you're talking about, understanding the brain, how it works. But I'm really interested in what you also said around when you have a client come to you, you ask them about the mind, but also what goes in the mouth. So
Correct.
why is that? Because I mean, we connected in the low carb space, and I'd love to know how that looked to you, and how then it looks to your clients.
Yeah. So once again, you know, going back to my mentor, I was very, very grateful and very lucky, you know, being the psychotherapist that he was. He actually came also from an orthomolecular medicine background. So, you know, I'm talking about Avron Hoffer and, you know, Linus Pauling and all of those kind of people, you know, for many, many years that have connected the gut health and what we consume, not just through our eyes, but through our mouth. So, you know, I was very, very lucky. And he said to me, he goes, if you want to do this properly, like he was a no BS man. Like he was just like, you know what, if you're going to help people, you just can't talk to a starving brain because you've got to do the whole thing. And I'm like, okay.
But
So
I love that. Can I just say, because that's one of the fundamental problems I have with what a lot of people do. They're either in the mind or the body space. You know, there's very few people like yourself that cross over into both. And I've seen that too. It's fundamentally vital to look at both, but we kind of just sit in one or the other.
it's critical. You just, you know, like, especially if I've got someone that comes to me and they say they've got anxiety, I'm like, right, okay. So we go through, you know, also we learn anxiety. Anxiety is not something that we are born with unless you have a parent, obviously a mum, and you're in utero and she has anxiety. Yes, of course, you're going to get cortisol in your utero, but once you're out, that will obviously lower. But if you're in the environment of anxiety, you feel it, so you absorb it. And that's also connected. So anything like anxiety, depression, you know, diet programming, food programming, that's all a side effect of your self-image in that stage of programming. So I can tell someone immediately when they say to me, you know, I have anxiety, I'm like, right, okay, I'm going to give you an idea of, I think I know what you eat. And they're like, okay. So I'm just like, okay, you crave sugar. You eat a lot of high carbohydrate food. You know, you may eat, you know, 4 o'clock slump. You may go for a muffin instead of an apple. And they're like, yeah, that's been my whole life. I just have a very, very high diet in sugar and processed carbohydrates. So it's just like, well, at the end of the day, if you want your brain and your mind to work together, you must understand that, are you using food as a nourishment or are you using it as a punishment? So that's the other thing when you just touch then, Trace, on your clients. Again, if we go back to food programming, especially as a woman, you know, I'm sure pretty much most of your listeners and mums are on a diet, probably multiple diets most of their life. As a young girl, that's what we see. So it's always using food as, oh gosh, I can't eat that because that's not healthy, or you know, that's going to make me fat. But most of the time, we also aren't understanding the external marketing and the environment that we're also getting pushed down our throat and our eyes that actually isn't correct. So a lot of it is unlearning what you think you know about food versus nourishment, and what you're doing actually with food and exercise as a punishment, which most people do.
So what's the link then between eating too much sugar and anxiety? So why is that a problem?
Well, basically, if you think about, I always use the word calming or chaotic. So the minute that you put, so if I say to someone, okay, so if you looked at something like an apple versus a donut, which one is more chaotic to your body versus calming? And obviously everyone understands the apple is. However, depending on your own self-image and what you're feeding yourself, and you also, if you have a consistent diet of high sugar, then your insulin's going up and down, and you get crashes all day, every day, and that's not what humans are designed to do. But when you eat sugar, most of the time, people aren't even conscious when they're eating. People go into unconscious eating They don't even know half the time, tasting it, feeling it, swallowing it. They're just shoveling it in to normally also fill a void, an emotional void. So that's also what food's used for as well. However, sugar is amazing for your dopamine. So it's, we can talk about sugar all day, but we know it is bad for you. It is very bad for you. It's terrible on your gut, but also too, if you're, fueling that with Coke and, energy drinks and all of those kind of things, you're going to be strung out. And I always call it you're in fight or flight response all the time, because your body's job is to keep you alive. That's its job. And food is meant to fuel you to operate at your optimal as a human being. And if I look at every single person, even people close to me, a lot of people have no idea how their body is actually meant to feel and how it's meant to operate.
Scary, really, isn't it?
Very scary.
So what would be an optimal brain food then? If we want to fuel our brains optimally, what sort of foods should we be looking at?
Animal protein. Like, honestly, it's something that we have survived and lived on for, millions and millions of years, and it is back to fat. Like, our brain it's about 62% fat. So, if we think about this whole low, fake sugar, chemical sweeteners and low fat, and, most of the time people are eating foods with barcodes on them that have like 20 or 30 ingredients in them your body doesn't even recognize, let alone you even understanding what it is. Your body is a very simple tool. If you understand the fact that fat does not make you fat unless you're actually eating sugar and processed foods along with it. But again, same thing with breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Like, we know that that's a fast. That's just a marketer's dream. And anyone that thinks that cereal is a good breakfast idea is you've got to unlearn that. That's not what your body's designed to eat.
So it's interesting, isn't it? Because of course we're, entering this time. So since the 70s, we've been, the processed food industry has skyrocketed. We've been told to cut fat. Our natural carbohydrate intake has skyrocketed. So we've essentially been living this low fat, high carbohydrate life, and we have huge problems with metabolic health, obesity, cancers, everything, mental health
going through the roof.
Through the roof, which, exactly what you've been saying, what we eat, what we put in here affects everything. And I love it how some people have this cognitive dissonance that our brain is somehow not connected to our gut. Like, how is that?
Get quite a blank look when people are like, no, that's not connected. I'm just like, that it actually is, because that's where you get your so even if your viewers obviously follow you, and they probably know this, but your serotonin is made in your gut. Like a high percentage of that serotonin is come from that gut space that gets sent to your mind or your brain to actually work. But again, I always say to people, don't ask a doctor what to eat unless they're actually qualified in nutrition at a deep level, not just done a weekend course in nutrition, because you might as well go and ask your dentist, who probably may give you a little bit more better idea. But you've got to really understand that as a human, it's your job to understand, hold on, what am I fueling myself with? Not just visually, but what, I always say to people, it's consumption of both ears, eyes, and mouth.
Love it. It is. It's so, yeah, it so is. So the other thing that I see happening, so we just mentioned the whole dietary guidelines rubbish that we've been sort of under the spell of for the last 40 years. And it's, hopefully starting to change a little bit, although until it actually officially changes, there will still be a lot of sludge, I suppose, we'll be up against. But my question, I'd love to get your thoughts on what I see as the next big wave of top-down rubbish that we're going to have to sift through with the plant-based agenda in terms of fake meats. So I'd love your thoughts, on fake meats, because, I mean, I know you and I are going to say they're rubbish, and I know you will say they're rubbish, but I just, the marketing of these people is so clever, and they lie. They literally lie about the benefits of this. So let's undo that. And is it better for our health, mind and body, to eat fake meat?
Absolutely not. I'm actually quite terrified, Tracy, like, in the next 5 to 10 years of what's actually going to happen. We're all already as a society metabolically unhealthy already. Funny you say that. I was actually at a supermarket this morning and I actually saw some of that fake mint stuff. I looked at the ingredients and I was horrified. If I had a dog, I don't think he would even probably eat it. But again, being in this space, and when I'm presented with something, I am a researcher as well. So I'll get to the bottom of, who's paid for it, what's the author bias, where's it come from? Like, don't just take a study based on this is, plant-based and this is real. It's like, oh, no, I'm going to pull that apart because I want to know if or not that was paid by, and most of them are paid by the industries that are producing the product, which is just unethical. But again, I think, communities like ours and, what we're trying to do, and, communities in relation to low carb, and even if we move into the carnivore community, like the amount of real information there, and just, people are actually opening their minds. I always say to people, if you have cognitive dissonance with something, don't be triggered by it. Just be aware that it's been presented to you for a reason. Just have a look and just really dig deep and ask the people that don't have anything to monetary gain from it. So that's the other thing too. Like, when you talk about so many people in the community, like, I'm a massive fan of Dr. Paul Mason in Sydney. He is just such a brilliant human being. And when he gets something, he pulls it apart and he will bring the truth. As much, I'm sure there's cognitive dissonance going on everywhere when you hear him speak, but, especially from you don't actually need plants in your diet. That's a huge thing.
I know.
Yeah.
And he's got a video on YouTube that I've shared on my page and with a few people. It's like, how are you smarter than your doctor or something? And I just thought, good on you. Can you imagine how many, doctors or, would just not even know, who does he think he is? I'm not even going to go there. Yeah.
No. And, I also find, coming from a mental health space as well, and this is just, number one for me with anyone that I work with, and if you're going on a ketogenic diet or you go on a carnivore lifestyle, and you know what, and that's healed your mental health, or that's healed an autoimmune for you, celebrate that person. If you're a vegan, don't attack another human being. Like, just look at it and go, you know what? I celebrate that person, because, until you actually are inside someone else's body and know what it feels like to have an autoimmune or an anxiety or a depression that can actually be healed with food, don't judge someone. Because for me, mental health comes first and physical health. They must go together. So again, if you're in cognitive dissonance, move away, check your trigger, understand about it, what's it trying to teach you, and just do your own research.
So the message I hear from that is basically stop looking without, look within, and you'll find the answers. I remember you telling me about someone who, you must have done a post about meat or carnivore or something, and you had I don't know, was it a vegan, someone say something to you, and I can't quite remember what you said, but I remember it was really amazing. Can you remember what?
Yeah, it was actually on Dr. Paul Saladino's post. He called Dr. Paul Saladino stupid, and I was just like, oh, well, that's not really, that's a bit silly. So, and then he'd made some other comments. So I kind of wrote back and I just said, look, being a clinical therapist and dealing with people who are mentally challenged in their life and, you know, suffer from anxiety and depression and all different types of things, I don't think you have the right to judge someone if they're choosing to eat an animal-based diet, because if that's healing them, you celebrate them. Now, if you've healed yourself on a vegan diet, I celebrate you. I'm not going to attack you. That's your choice. However, always be kind. If you can't be kind, move away. Now, I expected a whole barrage of someone coming back to me, but he actually liked it. And then I hadn't seen him comment on anything else on that actual post. So, yeah. But
planting the seed somewhere.
Yeah, it's very easy for people to be quite dogmatic, I think, in the plant-based world. But you know what? That's fine. But just don't come out and attack someone else because they're using a method that's working for them. And I'm beyond passionate for animal protein. It's a proper human diet, and you know there's so many researchers and so many people out there that are talking about it and how important it is for your brain. It's you can't function without it. It's that simple.
Exactly. And isn't it interesting how, you know, when people do, I suppose, attack someone else, it kind of comes back to that misunderstanding of how the brain works, doesn't it? You know, all the stuff that you were talking about at the start, if we could get people to understand that a little bit more, and as we keep saying, you know, look within, and triggers I find really fascinating, you know, when people have triggers, you know, triggers to me are such a gift. They're such a gift to stop, look within, learn something about yourself, because how on earth why do we expect everybody around us to change so that we don't have to feel a trigger? How about we look at that and let people just be who they want to be?
100%. I actually have a document I wrote about that, actually. It was about, you know, triggers or your friends. And if you're conscious enough to actually look at them, and that's where human growth is. And the other thing that's really fascinating, and I know I think we spoke about it on the low carb live that we did a little while ago, you know, whenever anybody wants to step out that diet programming and, you know, do something that's quite perceivably radical to someone else, and you know all of a sudden your diet and what you put on your plate becomes everybody else's business, and you know the minute that you stop eating Nutri-Grain but you have a steak for breakfast, you're going to die. It really comes back to, again, that cultural programming of what someone's choosing to do in relation to fueling their body, and if they've found a way to do it that's healing them, it's nobody else's business. And it is about, if you feel triggered to say something like, you know, what are you eating steak for breakfast for? That's just that internal dissonance kind of getting triggered. But because we're so indoctrinated, we're thinking that, you know, that's so unnormal to have steak for breakfast. It's like, but who said that? Oh, well, I know who said it. You know, the marketing dream teams that design breakfast cereal.
That's right. And isn't one of the most awesome gifts to start to be curious around, you know, our habitual thoughts that come up? It ties into it. It's like, you know, we think there's set responses for everything. We think there's, you know, that first thing that comes up just has to come straight out of our mouth. Well, you know, there is so much space to see new things. You know, it may still come up, right? But whether we pay attention to it or not, you know, we've got that conscious brain that, you know, can allow us to let things pass and to see new things, and, you know, be curious. You know, imagine if you said to someone, instead of saying, oh my God, what are you having steak for breakfast for? Like one of my clients, actually, Catherine, that you met on that live chat that we did. She gets asked all the time, so when are you going to stop this rubbish and go back to eating, you know, normal food?
Pop-tarts for breakfast.
I know. And she's, you know, so it's like, well, imagine if instead you said to her, you know, oh, it's interesting. It's a little different. You know, can you tell me why you're doing that? Or I'm a little bit curious, you know, like completely different approach. you know, you could have a lovely conversation and maybe both of you might see something new.
Yeah, and it definitely comes back to that inner boundary and really standing firm about, you know what, this is my body. And if I've found something that literally has lit me up and it may seem very foreign to someone else, that's okay. But for the person that's in it and hasn't experienced how to kind of block that out, that just comes back to owning, you know what, if I don't start reprogramming myself now by saying, you know what, I hear your opinion, I'm not going to take it on board because I know what I'm doing. And even in a lot of the communities that, you know, you and I are in, Trace, like a lot of it is, you know, a lot of people go, well, if I go to a friend's, you know, house and I'm only eating steak without the chips, someone says something to me, I'm just like, it's your life. That's the only explanation you need. That's it. And if someone's judging you on your food and not who you are, that's a bit of a big problem.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because so many people in the space talk about that, you know, that relationships change. And, you know, I really don't see that they have to. I think if we could all just do exactly this, learn from you around this stuff, you know, we could let people be who they want to be and just embrace things that look different. You know, isn't it funny how we think we know someone, so we create this persona around someone, you know, like if I had a client who, you know, every Thursday she would catch up with her mom and they would have a wine and a cake. Now, she had a whole lot of thinking around how can I do low carb and still do that with her mom.
Yeah.
And so we talked about it and I said, well, you know, we were talking about the fact that, you know, the relationship with your mum, it may appear that the food's involved, but, you know, it's about it isn't about the food. And, you know, you could talk to your mum and say, look, I still really want to catch up, but mum, I'm not going to have that and I'm not going to have that. I know that might make things a little bit strange, but maybe I'll have, you know, I'll have that, we'll have that, or, you know, like,
yeah,
we sit in this, oh, it's not, we've got to change something and what will they think of me and they won't love me anymore or whatever it is that we'll tell ourselves. But there's so much we can see around all that. Oh,
yeah, and food has always
Mm.
been used as a programming tool.
Mm.
You know, it's like when I have clients say to me, well, what about my comfort food? I'm like, food should never be used as a comfort. If you need comfort, you need to kind of delve into the association where that came from. And, you know, the minute that you use the word diet, like your mind just goes, whoa, and then it just goes crazy because you've done 20 of them before. And your mind literally, the way that it works, the minute that you say, I don't want that, it deletes don't, because don't's a neutral word. So the minute that you say, don't eat the Tim Tam, all you can think about is the Tim Tam.
It's the Tim Tam.
Correct, because we have so conditioned between bad food, good food, this food, that food. It should come back to, am I nourishing or am I punishing? Am I surviving or am I thriving? And most people use food as an emotional crutch, like anything externally, whether it's alcohol, food, whatever. But again, it's like if you're using, you know, even winter, like I heard people say recently, like, oh, winter's coming and I can have my comfort food. And that's a very slippery slope. Because if you need comfort from food, that's a very long cycle of in and out of dieting culture. And, you know, even the word cheat, I hate the word cheat. I hate it. It's one of the worst things that I hear people say, like, I fell off the bandwagon or I'm going to have a cheat day. Unless you've got a really strong self-image, correct. We learn that. And I've come from a bodybuilding background. So, you know, we, you know, over 15, 16 years ago now, and we would have like a cheat day on a Sunday. But that cheat day would then, if your self-image is not in a great space, that then creates, well, I'm bad, I've cheated, look what I've done. Very slippery slope.
That's fascinating. And I'd love you to share more about your personal story. You know, you just mentioned you're from a bodybuilding background. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, how much you've had to see beyond, I suppose, a lot of that stuff that you used to believe around food. And
Well, absolutely. And I think that's kind of where my passion from self-image came from, because, growing up, mum was a meat and 3 veg and that kind of thing. And that was pretty standard in the 70s and the 80s. But again, my self-image was not in a great space growing up because, my dad passed away when I was 6 months old, and, my mom remarried and she went through a very bad divorce, and, I moved around a lot, and she suffered from, and still does to this day, mental health challenges. And as a child, I obviously was exposed to that environmentally, but, I left Queensland because that's where I grew up, and I moved to Melbourne, and I ended up meeting this personal trainer who was an amazing friend of mine at the time. And she said, do you want to be a competitor? And I'm like, yeah, sure. However, in hindsight now, the only reason I did that was because my self-image was not great at the time. So again, coming back to external validation, it's like, well, if I have a great body, then I'm validated. Or if I'm doing certain things that most people don't or can't do, you dieted for 14 weeks straight, and constantly eating every 3 hours and training twice a day and 7 days a week. It's full on. But for me, coming out of that trace, I ended up with quite a very unhealthy relationship with food, to the point where you'd eat and then purge because you were your body was so depleted, and, it was a high carb diet as well, not a lot of fat. And I didn't know back then. You just trusted the person. So it took me again into the journey of now where I am of understanding how much food controls your mood. I was constantly craving sugar, constantly hungry all the time. And only up until, I still train now, but I train very differently. So only up until a year ago, I was still kind of really eating every 3 hours and, looking at my calories and all of that kind of thing, because I'd obviously come from that nutritional background, which is what I call old school now, with, that got to eat every 3 hours to keep metabolism up.
Yeah.
And counting calories, which is just face palm. And then I was, during COVID, I was diagnosed with celiac. And I'd always had some quite funky autoimmune things happen previously. I ended up with idiopathic urticaria quite badly for a year, which literally my whole body was inflamed, which no one knew what the hell it was. So I had to take histamines for twice a day for a year. Then my journey to where I am today. So a year ago, I was sitting here at this computer and I was Googling celiac and gluten, and then a little video of Paul Mason came up on my YouTube, and I was like, oh, who's this guy? So I pushed on that, and he just literally blew my mind. And I'm just like, whoa, lectins, oxalates, histamines, and it all started to add up to me as to why I'd experienced all these really funky things, especially with urticaria, because that's actually a massive histamine response in your body, which if I look back then in my diet, I was lots of wheat, lots of gluten, lots of vegetables, lots of spinach, which, as we know, it's one of the highest oxalate plants you can eat. So I went down a rabbit hole for about 3 hours, and that's when I found about being a carnivore and using an animal-based diet. And for me, it just felt so right and so aligned. And I just thought, right, I'm just going to start removing it. I'd already moved gluten and things like that anyway for quite some time, but even in my head, I even had a cognitive dissonance issue going, can I really live without plants? Like, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I just because I am a researcher, I'm wanting to find, and I ended up finding John Baker and everyone in the community that we know, and then ended up going, well, hold on, I'm going to eat fat, I'm going to eat a lot of meat, and literally it was about 3 weeks, my whole body it was just like I had this superhero version of myself appear in energy, and I've never experienced such clarity in my mind, energy. My skin's amazing. But then I was just like, well, I'm not going to go to a normal GP because I know what he's going to say about my LDLs. And, you know, so I'd gone through the things with Paul about that. So I went and found another, a low carb / carnivore doctor here in Melbourne, and because I knew where I needed to go.
Yeah.
And had my bloods done, and he was just like, wow, I've pulled your bloods from the year before when you were eating your normal diet. He said, it's phenomenal. He goes, where you're at now and what your bloods are like. So literally I'm 90% carnivore now, and I've been like that since, well, coming up to 28th of March, actually. I'm coming up for a whole year, and just phenomenal. And even in the work that I do, Trace, it's just phenomenal. I know how powerful food is. And even with my clients prior to being carnivore, I'm like, right, you've got to get rid of the wheat and the gluten and the processed sugars, and you have to add in animal protein. It's a part of a human-based diet. But experiencing the level of going to be fat adapted, as I was also borderline insulin resistant because I've been eating for because the doctor had said to me, my doctor originally, and I'm like, at that point in time, I was 59 kilos. And he said to me, he goes, oh, you're nearly on borderline type 2 diabetes. And I'm like, what? And this is the other thing too. You don't have to be overweight to actually be in insulin resistance and to be metabolically unhealthy. But because I'd literally been eating carbohydrates every 3 hours for most of my life, I was always hungry, always searching for food. But it was that shift that I needed to go from being celiac into being a full carnivore now. And it's just changed my life, like just
completely. Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Amazing, isn't it, that we have such a misconception about health being related to how skinny you are. And, you know, I often think about it that if you are obese, in a way, you are lucky because you're more likely to seek out help and be told, you know, that there's, you know, you've got insulin resistance, there's type 2 diabetes, there's something you need to do about it, as opposed to if you're thin and everyone says to you, oh, you're healthy. I actually had a doctor say that to me. I went to a doctor, just a local one, because it was a few years ago now. I just wanted to get my bloods done, and I couldn't be bothered to go all the way into my doctor. And I thought, I know what I'm looking for anyway, and I'll just go to this guy. And I asked him to make sure he checked my HbA1c. And he was like, well, why do you want that? I'm like, well, because I want to know how insulin resistant I am and how close to type 2 diabetes I am. And he's like, well, you're skinny. You just stay skinny. You'll be fine.
Isn't that interesting?
I'm not skinny anyway, but I wasn't, you know, like I just thought, well, I said to him, well, actually, you know, my brother is late onset type 1. He was type 2, I don't know what he is now. My mum nearly died of an embolism. So really, you know, I really just want to get the blood tests I want to do. And can you make sure you send me the results? Thank you very much. And that's it. See you later. You know?
Yeah. Isn't it funny? Like you ask them because we know what we need and we know what we're looking for. And a lot of them is a lot of resistance, which is, you know, again, you know, we're trying to change that modality with people. And, you know, I think the other thing, it's about empowering you to actually understand you can ask for those things. You know, this is your body. Go and ask for the blood test you want. Ask for the results. Now, if you don't get them, go to another doctor that can access them, that can help you. And I think that's a lot of the empowerment that we need. I think, you know, a lot of work is still needed to be done in empowering people to really understand what processed sugars are doing to your body, what all of the things that you believe are a part of the standard Australian diet. It's not coincidence that it's called the SAD diet. But again, you know, like you said before, Trace, everyone's getting sicker and sicker and sicker, and it's not because there's a lack of medication. You know, you can't you got to look at it and go, something is not working. And it's just about unlearning, being a bit triggered, but just doing that. I've got a client of mine's one kidney. He tried keto and always in kidney pain, always no energy. And he had been kind of following my journey, and I just said to him, where are you at? And he goes, it's just not working, And I'm like, well, why don't you try carnivore? He's been carnivore now for nearly 3 months. Kidney pain gone. His kidney is functioning the best it ever has, and he only has one. He's lost, as a side effect of looking after his body, he's lost weight, and he's just got so much more energy. He says to me, I cannot thank you enough. He goes, it was quite a challenge to think that I would be able to do this, but he said, I've just never felt this good in my life. So I'm like, great, excellent.
Fantastic. So what do you think that is, the difference between keto carnivore? Because I was keto for a long time before I'm coming up to, I'm a couple of months behind you being full carnivore. But, like in my mind, I didn't have think there was a huge amount of difference. But I think there is in a lot of ways, because I think fundamentally the ketogenic diet, while being just a label for real food, is still quite high in things that do contain a lot of oxalates and things like that, and lectins, and possibly it works for a lot of people. 100% it works and fantastic. But there are people like your client, and for me as well, it wasn't. I needed to change it because of Hashimoto's. Not that keto caused Hashimoto's or anything. That was not the case. But I feel a lot better now being carnivore. So what do you think is the difference?
Yeah, I think for him, he had no idea what oxalates were, and he was, shoveling down a lot of vegetables. But also too, I think with the whole keto kind of umbrella, a lot of it is still, keto snacks here, and a lot of it is still not real food. I think the core of it is just understanding, what works for your body, and some carbohydrates and some vegetables won't work. And this is where people get confused. It's about, you are unique. It's the same with when I talk to people about their minds. Like, I don't do a one-size-fit-all process, because you are unique in the way that you work. And that's the same with your gut. So him removing all of that, which I sent him some information on oxalates, and he's like, oh my God, I had every single one of those symptoms. And he said, and, my doctor had no idea. And I'm like, well, no, because we're programmed to think that vegetables are good for us. Now, some people are okay with them, and it's great. But for me, I think whenever I'm working with someone and they're coming to me from, both a mental health point, but also a weight loss point, I will never, ever, ever guide someone on that weight loss point first, because it's very unachievable if you're just putting that out there as, I want to lose weight, I want to lose weight, I want to lose weight. We've got to get to that diet culture around, get out of your body's way, understand how to fuel it properly, fuel your mind, fuel your ears, fuel your gut, which then will make your brain work properly. Weight loss is a side effect of that.
I love it how you say that. That's so true. It so is. And it's like weight gain is a symptom to me that there's something that you need to look at.
Yep. Absolutely. And it's the same with exercise. Exercise, from the background I come from, that was used as a punishment to undo what you'd eaten. And that's what a lot of people use it for. But get your insulin under control. That's how simple it is. But exercise, yes, if you're kind of looking at a percentage, your diet is 90% of what you do. And it's about healing your body from the inside out. So and I always say this, if you're going to treat your body like a garbage chip, it's going to respond accordingly, and it's not going to function properly.
And nobody wants a body that doesn't function properly. Nobody.
No, you don't.
Can I ask you, I know we're getting close to time. I need to let you go soon, but I would love your insight on the body positivity movement that is happening at the moment, because I have a lot of conversations with people in the space around it, and I am all for people loving their body and, you know, doing whatever it is they want to do in life, regardless of the body that they have. However, when it comes to health, we can't ignore what our body is showing us and telling us. But there's you know, you can't even in a lot of spaces discuss the distinction and talk about it in terms of health. You know, what's your insight around that?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I think it was Cosmopolitan, I think in the US, put up quite a controversial image of a woman. You know, now normally in that space, language-wise, she probably would have been put in the fuller size or even borderline, maybe obese. But again, it depends on people's perceptions, because once again, your lens to the world is what you're based on, your inside thinking. However, I think it's a very slippery slope around looking at the body of the person versus the self-image in relation to what is going on the inside. Now, if you look at that body from that point of view, that is showing your body is not coping. It is not working properly. And every single person in the world that will tell you that if you have a lot of visceral fat or your midsection is quite large, that is an unhealthy way to be. And, you know, that's why I'm so passionate about the fact that if you put your mental health first and fuel it that way, you'll never have to worry about your body again. But I think that the slippery slope of putting people like that out there to be revered, I think is probably a very unhealthy way to move. Now, if I had a chat with that person that was possibly on that cover, I will guarantee you at some level her self-image would not be in a great space. But also I'm concerned about if a young girl sees that. So, you know, I've got a 10-year-old daughter. Now, if that's revered as that's okay, then I think we've got a bit more communication and conversation that we've got to have around that. Because it is a tough one, but your body will show you exactly what you said. Your body will show you that it's not coping.
Yeah, I agree. I think we really need to be allowed to have conversations around it where people, you know, don't think we're being, you know, judgmental or, you know, I don't know. We've got to start talking about it more. I'm the same. I've got a 17-year-old daughter, and, you know, I want her to see, you know, a health, you know, yes, it's health at any size, but it's not health at every size, you know, which I think is more, you know, I think it was actually Jillian, the nutritionist is part of Low Carb Melbourne. We were having this discussion on Sunday, and she said that's what I think people have taken the message as, and, you know, it's got to be talked about more. We have to be allowed, not shut down and said, you know, you're putting people, you know, down by talking about their weight or something like that. And it's not what we're trying to do. You know, I think actually believe there's a lot of a trauma response. If we get to a point where we think we don't care about our health, or we can, you know, it's because we've shut down a whole lot of stuff that we don't want to address.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, if you look at a level of, let's look at what's going on the inside, you know, let's look at our bloods, look at what we're depleted in. I think that's where it's got to start, you know, more than having any judgment. So when I look at, you know, covers like that, you know, my first thing is, wow, I just hope her you know, her pancreas is functioning, and I just hope that her heart's okay and that her visceral fat is low. And, you know, that's what I look at, but also too the mental self-image part of it, of going, okay, well, if that person 100% has a very, very healthy image in relation to their mental thinking, but let's look at really what's going on the inside organ-wise, because we've only got one set of organs. That's it. I always say to people, we can't just go down to the organ shop and get a new one.
Oh, you can't?
No, sadly. But again, you know, it comes back to both men and women the same. Like, I've dealt with men that have got a lot of, self-image issues around their bodies as well. But let's keep it simple. Your brain needs amino acids, and the amino acids that you need come from meat. That's it. It's the most important thing, to get any level of nutrition that you need to feed and fuel your body. If you remove that, it's a very, very difficult space, and it just doesn't happen. You can't manipulate in a tablet what you can get from an amino acid in a piece of meat. You just can't.
No, you can't. You can't. What a wonderful conversation. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. I could talk to you all day, and I think we'll have to talk again for sure. Where can people find you, darling?
So you can find me at my website, which is nataliewest.com, but also too just on social media. So it's natalie.e.west, or just stalk Tracy.
Yeah, I'll have all that down, of course. And you consult via Zoom, so you can correct.
I do.
You can talk to anyone. Yep.
Yeah, so anyone that wants to reach out to me, just send me a message, say that you saw me on on Tracy's podcast, and what I can do, definitely open to a 30-minute free consult for anyone that wants to jump on and have a chat with me about anything that we've spoken about or anything that resonated with you. Just reach out and let me know.
Oh, beautiful! What an offer! I'm sure you'll have. If you're sitting there thinking, oh, should I? Yes, you should. Definitely take that offer up. It could potentially be life-changing. So it's, wonderful. Love what you do. Absolutely love everything you post. I read it all, and I'm so grateful that we've been connected. And of course, you are a part of the upcoming summit and are going to be sharing a whole lot of wisdom and knowledge and insight, which will be amazing. So yeah, and thanks for today. It was great.
Oh, thank you. Yay. I can't wait.
Thanks, darling.